Right, what's happening, people, and welcome back to another episode of Joey and Josh. And today we are going to cover a case that has been in very high demand from you guys at home. In the comment section, you've been asking for this one. So, without any further ado, today we're going to talk about the disappearance of Andrew Gosden.
Andrew Gosden went missing on the 14th of September 2004 when he was just 14 years old. People described Andrew as a genius-level student, receiving straight A's at school and being tipped to go on to one of the most prestigious universities in England when the time was right. He was a very normal lad, raised in a loving home with not a single day of truancy, who suddenly vanished without a trace. In this video, we're going to go through all the evidence we have to hand to piece together the circumstances that led to Andrew to buy a one-way ticket to London and then disappear off the face of the earth without telling his friends, family, or anyone that he knew. We're going to dive into the possible theories of why he left, what happened when he ended up in London, and try to comprehend how, in one of the most surveilled cities in the entire world, that Andrew has still never been found.
But just quickly, before we get into it, if you aren't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really, really helps us out. And if you want to go that extra step, you can officially become a member, part of the hardcore of this channel. And my God, does that have its perks. It means that you can get the episodes around 48 hours, sometimes even more, before they drop on YouTube to the general public. And as well as that, we will be hosting weekly live streams where we discuss the episodes, where we talk about upcoming episodes, and where we interact with you guys, the members of this channel. If you're watching on a computer right now, just hit the join button, or if not, hit the link in the description to this video to become a member.
So you have to admit, this is probably one of the most high-profile disappearance cases since Madeleine McCann, and you were right in saying in the intro, a lot of people are talking about this, and so we had to cover it, didn't we?
Happened very, very close to Madeleine McCann as well.
Yeah, same sort of time period.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that he made his way into the capital, spoiler alert, into London was something that sort of blew this case up, CCTV footage and whatnot. And even though this was before the social media stronghold, it's something that to this day, if you speak about this man, Andrew Gosden, on the internet, it tends to get clicks, it tends to get attention, and it tends to generate real intrigue, because there are so many people that want to know what happened to this boy.
So why don't I tell you a little bit more about Andrew? You can learn a little bit more about him. Let's get straight into this. Andrew Paul Gosden was born on the 10th of July 1993 in Doncaster, South Yorkshire. And you'll hear a lot of people talking about Andrew's parents, Kevin and Glenys, who were practicing Anglican Christians, but chose not to baptise Andrew or his older sister Charlotte, as they wanted them to make their own choices later in life. The key thing about Andrew and his Catholicism, or lack thereof, is that he didn't accompany his family to church in the 18 months prior to his disappearance. The Gosden family lived in a leafy suburb of Doncaster called Balby, and he was nicknamed Roo. He was a really shy kid, to be fair, and often described as a bit of a home bird to those that knew him, and he would often choose to remain at home rather than going out to meet other people. He was incredibly shy, and yes, he was super intelligent, but he didn't really sort of translate that into being a very outgoing personality. And on that, his father had said that he had a very close group of friends, but it's clear that he really wasn't very outgoing or gregarious, and he very much wanted to stick at home, and because of that, he was a very keen gamer. And you'll hear quite a lot about an Xbox and a PSP later in this episode. What I would also say is that he was quite small for his age as well. Like, at the time that Andrew went missing, he was only 14 years old, but he looked much younger than that. He looks basically like a 12-year-old kid.
He also acted a lot younger than that. From
Why do you say that?
Well, I just think he acted quite young, like little bits and pieces. I've heard bits about the night of his disappearance. Do we want to speak a little bit about that, or do you want to lead on to that?
I'm going to lead on to that, and I'm going to give these guys a little bit more info on Andrew, because I think there's some other things that are important for this case. Okay. Did you know he was deaf in one ear?
No, but I do know that he, much like Madeleine McCann, right? Madeleine McCann had this thing where she had the teardrop in her eye, the stain, right? Andrew Gosden had like the weird, almost
little bumps on his ear.
I've been watching The Walking Dead recently. It almost looks like a walker took a bite out of his ear.
Yeah. It looks almost cauliflower ears, but we know this guy wasn't into jiu-jitsu.
He weren't a wrestler.
And he had thick prescription glasses. So you look at him now, really, he's a very distinctive looking kid. You'd recognise him, especially with those sort of marks. And as I say,
Geek.
He was. Don't say that. Don't say
Only
that. Don't say that. Well, speaking of how bright he was then, and if he was a geek, he was entered into a young gifted talent program and was an incredibly high achieving student, as I said in the intro. And he was called by one of his teachers a maths genius. Have you ever been described as a maths genius?
I don't think I've been described as any sort of genius.
I think you're a criminal genius.
Yeah, there you go.
And people said that he was going to get into Cambridge because of how intelligent he was. So obviously he was a very, very bright young lad, which makes this sort of disappearance so much more interesting, I think, as well, because of that level of intelligence. And what people have also commented on and said, and maybe sort of, I suppose, posed a question, was he bullied because of that? Because yes, he looked like a bit of a nerd, and yes, that sort of character often gets bullied at school. He was a fan of heavy metal, which often says to you that he might have been bullied.
Slipknot.
Don't want to make that generalization. And the reason why I can say it is because I also listen to Slipknot and some of that heavy metal music. We did a video recently where we covered the Jay Slater case, and what I find very interesting in that is that Joey, in his childhood, had a very similar childhood to Jay Slater, and I, in my childhood, had a very similar childhood to Andrew Gosden. Do you know why? Loved that sort of music, that heavy metal music at the time. Loved my Xbox. Had a pink PSP when I was a kid. Loved those games. Don't judge me, Joey. What colour was your PSP?
I didn't have a PSP.
Oh, you fucking loser.
What? Me and Andrew Gosden would have been in the same school year. You know that?
Yeah, I did know that. Yeah.
So he went missing when he was in year 8 at school then?
Would have been year 9.
Year 9.
If he was 14.
Year 9.
Yeah. What were you doing in year 9?
Getting noshed off.
So by all accounts,
it's awful because it's true.
Yeah, it is. By all accounts, Joey didn't have a sheltered life, but Andrew certainly did.
By the way, people like Andrew Gosden, I went to a school called Glyn in Epsom. Yeah, people like Andrew Gosden didn't get bullied at my school. Really?
Why? Who were you bullying at school then?
Why did you just assume I would bully
Well,
people?
if you haven't seen the episode, we did a whole episode on this being in childhood. And you told me about bushing. You told me about it's not called pocketing.
Pocketing, peanutting.
Peanutting, yeah. Just all those
washing.
I never did this, and you knew all about it. So it seems like you were the bully.
Andrew Gosden would have been described as a geek at my school.
Was there another one called a neek?
Neek, yeah.
What was a neek?
Like a nerd and a geek.
Oh, okay.
Combined.
So what was different
Infused,
what was a geek and a nerd? What was a geek and a neek different? Like, how were they different?
Ask Andrew. He was one, not me. I'm joking. No, I'm not going to keep making jokes about
You're
his
horrible.
missing. But he'd have been left alone at my school because you did just like they just
keep them at arm's length.
No, not even that. Just like Glim wasn't like that. Like you didn't bully like geeky kids. Like you more bullied the kids that tried to bully them or wanted to be cool.
You were the Robin Hood of bullies.
Bullying
the bullies, keeping the poor old lad safe.
There you go.
That's you.
Gosden would have liked me.
Yeah, he would have. Did you know that in 2006 he went on a little summer special program where he went to the University of Lancaster? He probably would have looked down on the University of Lancaster because he was going to Cambridge later on in his life, so he probably thought it was a pile of shit.
This was the Young and Gifted scheme.
It was, and he went there for 2 weeks. And his parents, saw him when he came back and said that it was a fairly uplifting and uneventful experience. But he went there and enjoyed it.
I've actually heard quite different.
Go on then.
In terms of uneventful, I've heard that his parents said that he started to come out his shell and seemed a bit more confident after going there. And it was something that he was quite infused by, and he had a good time. And I would imagine that you probably go to something like that if you're academic and you're very intelligent in a room full of people that are in the top 5%, I believe.
Yeah, maybe even more than that,
students their age that got sent there. I think that something that he would have gained a lot of confidence from, or maybe there was something that happened when he was there that
might have
brought
led
him
to
out of
something
his shell.
else.
Yeah,
yeah,
may
yeah,
have led
yeah.
to something else.
Let's dive
stick
into
a pin
that.
in that.
Yeah, very much so. Well, yeah, he seemed like he had a little bit more energy, but the events of the program were fairly uneventful. And the next part of the story is then 1 year after that. Bearing in mind the gifted program was in 2006, we're then moving on to the summer of 2007. Andrew's parents had said to him that he should plan his activities out for the summer. He shouldn't just be sat at home, sat on his Xbox doing nothing. And so what they said to him is that you should go and do various activities. And they were planning that out. 1 week he was going to go and, do X, Y, and Z. Another week he was going to do something else. And they said to him that he should go and see some of his family in London, which was a 2-hour or so train ride away. Now, he knew London very, very well because he'd seen his family there previously. And again, a 14-year-old lad taking the train down wasn't too crazy at the time, and the parents were very happy to do that. Andrew declined that offer. He did not go travelling. He didn't go and see his family that summer. He stayed at home. And that is then where we go into the day of the disappearance in 2007. In 2007, the school holidays end. He didn't go on that trip to London. He goes back to school as he normally would. But something very different happened when he went to school, didn't he? He changed his routine a little bit.
Are you on about his commute?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So me and you have disagreements on this because confirmed is that he changed his commute one day, right?
Correct.
But it was heavily rumoured and reported around the time that it was 2 days in a row that he changed his commute on the way home from school. And the reason this is significant is because the bus journey that he took home from school used to take between sort of 15 and 20 minutes to get him home.
Yep.
However, if he was to walk it, it's more like actually an hour and
Over
20
an hour.
minutes.
It's a 4-mile walk.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a considerable amount.
Yeah, so if you were to walk it a good amount of time, whether he did do it the 2 days in a row or whether he did it on just the one day is unbeknown. But what we do definitely know is on the Thursday, he did change his commute home from school. And for someone who was very regimented, like Andrew was, in terms of his routine, that is something that the police looked into with this case.
Yes, and his father did a fantastic interview, which we will definitely link in the description below because I think it's really worth watching as well, where he said this.
Andrew started to walk home from school rather than taking the bus.
I only did it once.
I did it once?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just one evening in the week before. I mean, and it was a really nice day. And he just,
Just fancied a walk.
Yeah, that's literally it. I mean, he just sort of got in and went, it was just a nice afternoon. I just thought, fancy a walk.
So yeah, it was a nice evening. He wanted to take in the scene, the sun out up in the sky. There's nothing wrong with that.
I'm going to jump in here. No, nothing wrong with that. This kid is like a gamer, yeah? Stays in. His parents want to get him out of his bedroom more, but he doesn't. When he actually does disappear, they don't even realise it because he spends so long in his bedroom all the time that it's unbeknown for hours that he's not just up in his bedroom. So that clearly shows that he spends so much time in his room. Actually, I don't think that is that normal, that he thought, oh, it's a lovely day, let me take the walk home. Like, this kid wants to get home and get on his Xbox or PSP or whatever.
Mate, come on. Maybe he had an epiphany. Maybe this was his moment where he said, do you know what? I want to sack off the games. I'm done with it. Maybe this was the start of his new life.
Well, it definitely was the start of something.
Maybe puberty hit in that moment and he went, I'm going to take a leaf after Joey Knight and I'm going to get out there and see what's out there in the real world.
Maybe.
Let's go to the night before the disappearance then. Did you know that Andrew sat and had a lovely dinner with his family in a wholesome suburban house, as one normally does? And he actually did various activities that night.
Well,
played the jigsaw.
You said to me earlier on that I was harsh or whatever for saying that this guy was immature for his age. He was in year 9. He did a jigsaw puzzle and arts and crafts that evening.
And watched TV with his mum before he went to bed. There's nothing wrong with that, Joey. I was doing that at 14. You were as well.
No one was doing jigsaw puzzles at 14 years old.
So there's nothing untoward about that. He goes to bed.
Yep.
Everyone thinks it's completely normal. And this is why this story is so interesting. He's such a normal, bright kid. He's never done anything wrong. He's never got in any trouble. But the day after that, it was the morning of September the 14th, 2007. Andrew woke up that day and he was a little bit irritable, Joey, wasn't he? Why was he so irritable?
Was it because he woke up late, so he was in a rush for school or something, wasn't it?
That's exactly it. And, maybe one can read a little bit more into this. Maybe he was irritable because he was planning on disappearing that day. But all his parents said was that he woke up a little bit late and that he was worried about missing the school run and missing being a bit late. So he was a bit irritable.
And the last thing that his parents know is that he leaves for school and he walks in the direction across the park, I believe it was.
Yes.
That was one of the ways you could get to the commute to school.
Yep.
But unbeknown to them, he actually waits in that park, doesn't he?
He does, and a reverend saw him on that trip. So again, we've got evidence that he did actually make it, but he didn't go towards school, did he? He went to a cash point, which one might do. Might want to go to the tuck shop, get a few little sweets.
You could buy a few sweets for £200, mate.
Oh, he got a lot of money out. That was a considerable amount of money.
Andrew Gosden.
He cleared the bank account.
Well, he didn't quite clear it.
Ooh.
He didn't quite clear it. £214 it was reported that he had in that bank account, of which he took £200 out. He then went back home once he knew everyone was out. He put his blazer of his school uniform in the washing machine or the tumble dryer. Some have theorised that maybe he did this because he spent so long in his room and he knew that his parents would expect that he'd be in his room. Some had said that he did this as a sort of a ploy for them to think that he's come home and he's stuck his blazer in the wash and he's gone up to his room. And he takes his PSP, changes his clothes. He actually changes into his favourite T-shirt, which is a heavy metal band T-shirt and whatnot.
Slipknot it was.
Slipknot.
Yeah, you're a big fan of them.
And some said sort of does himself up a little bit, makes himself look at his best. There were reports that even dyed his hair, but they're not actually confirmed.
I've seen the CCTV. It doesn't look like he dyed his hair to me.
No.
So
there you go. But what we do know is, following on from that, he travels to London. Now, when he goes to buy a ticket at the ticket office, the woman tells him that if he buys a return fare, it is literally just 50p more. However, Andrew doesn't opt to buy the return fare. He is insistent on a one-way ticket. Not only that, by the way, we spoke about that £200 he withdrew from his account. He also had £100 cash in his bedroom that he didn't take with him. And before he left the house, what did he take with him as well as the PSP?
Tell me.
He took his house keys with him.
So
at this point in the story, I'm assuming that Andrew Gosden believes he's coming home. He's coming back from London. But eventually he makes his way to King's Cross, doesn't he?
He does. But your theory in that he's planning to come back home, he didn't buy a return ticket. So he was obviously not planning to come home straight away. Otherwise, he would have just saved himself some money. So that's what's so curious about this.
Well, who knows? Who knows? We'll get into that. What do we know then about what happens after that? Because obviously his parents later on in the evening do find out that he's not at home.
Yep. The clerk that sold him the ticket finds it strange that he only bought a one-way ticket. So she makes a little mental note, and we'll come back to her in a second. He boards the train. It gets into London King's Cross at 9:35. There was a woman on the train who saw Andrew and said that he was sitting there very quietly and happily playing on his PSP. Now, very interestingly, he didn't take the charger for the PSP, which is also a key moment in the story. Anyone that's had a PSP in their past, which Joey hasn't had the pleasure to do, would know that your PSP lasts for about 4 or 5 hours. You need the charger if you're going to go to anywhere for any long period of time.
And therefore, that leads me to believe that Andrew Gosden did plan on returning home. Otherwise, you would have took the charger for your PSP and you would have took the extra £100 cash.
There you go.
In your bank account.
At 9 a.m, just before he lands at London King's Cross, the school notice that he isn't there. He's got a 100% record of being at school. They immediately call the parents. They can't get through to the parents. They leave them a message saying that Andrew is missing and they are worried about his whereabouts. Can they call the school back? The message is never received. They called the wrong parents. So the parents at this point, Andrew's parents, had no idea that he was missing. So the train arrives at 11:20 actually, and there is some footage of Andrew coming out of the station that was found. Now that wasn't found immediately, but Yorkshire police later see that CCTV footage. He's walking away from the station, and at 11:25 a.m, that is the last footage of Andrew seen. So let's see what the parents were up to at this time. Obviously, they don't know at this point that Andrew is missing. And when they returned home at 5 o'clock, they were still unaware of his whereabouts. They presumed when they arrived that Andrew was in the basement because that's what he would do all the time. He'd go and play games and chill in there in that little area. But when he doesn't come up for dinner, that's where they start to be concerned. And what they do immediately is call all of his friends and the neighbours, because obviously what he could have done is just gone to see some of his mates. The friends and the neighbours, no one has seen him at that point. So at 7 o'clock on that day, they call the police. And then Andrew's family also retraced the route that he walked to school. They look around all of the local area, but they couldn't find anything. 3 hours into the search, they start producing missing person leaflets with his face on there and started distributing those to the community. Again, people all around the community were searching up until nightfall, and then they had to stop and basically go back home because they couldn't find him. There was no sign of him at the time.
Now, the family go to London, don't they? Because obviously they want to be there on the ground where he's last seen, obviously looking round, handing out posters, approaching people, asking if they've seen him. Also, it's reported that he had family himself in London, so obviously they probably visited them, saw if there was any contact and things like that. But apart from 1 or 2 sightings, that was the last anyone ever seen or heard from Andrew Gosden, at least anything confirmed. Now, there was multiple sightings. Do you know, right, we're sat here in podcast room Barnes right now. Do you know where one of the sightings was?
Wasn't it Mortlake?
It was Mortlake
yeah,
train station,
it was literally
which
just
is
down the
literally
road.
just there from where we're sat at. And then apparently he walked up White Hart Lane, which is where
I
we
didn't
are
know
now.
that, really?
Yeah, apparently.
I
So
didn't
apparently he was walking up here, but I don't reckon that was true. The other one was the Pizza Hut sighting. Now, the parents, right, said that they firmly believed that this was Andrew. And obviously, look, if Andrew loved Pizza Hut, and they were saying that certain things of his behaviour and the way he was acting led them to believe it. Firstly, 2007, places had CCTV. Why was he not picked up on CCTV? And secondly, I do believe, right, I've been in a situation very, very recently, right, where I have been trying to identify someone. And the second you get anything like close to trying to work out who this person is, you do pin your hopes on it. And I know this through personal experience recently. So although the parents believe strongly that I think it was Oxford Street Pizza Hut,
it was,
where he was apparently seen in, although they do believe that was him, again, I can't give all that much credibility to it without a bit of CCTV footage.
No. The family always were very annoyed that the police didn't look at that case and citing up a bit more detail. They were so annoyed about that. So yeah, I think that's really the last even semi-credible shred of evidence. There were some other sightings in Covent Garden and Southwark Park, but again, very, very unsure. There were also other people claiming to be Andrew on the internet. There was some cases that came out afterwards. And there is also another sort of key moment in the case with this person that went to a police station in Leominster. Do you remember this?
This was weird. So the police station was on an industrial estate. It wasn't just like on a high street or whatever. And therefore you had to communicate through a telecom before being let into the police station. Now, unidentified male went to the police station and said, I have information on Andrew Gosden. Now, by the time that this police force were able to come down and let the male in, he had disappeared, right? Then they receive a letter, which is apparently from the male in question, stating that he had seen Andrew Gosden. I can't remember what area it was even in.
Yeah, I can't remember.
It wasn't
either.
London. It
no,
was
it
like
wasn't
Bradford or something like that. However, it had been already leaked to the media by this point that this incident had happened, so the letter could have literally just been fraudulent.
It was Shrewsbury. That's where they found him, apparently. So yeah, we've honestly, like, this is a really weird element of it, but there are so many people in cases like this that put up hoaxes that aren't true. Maybe he just got spooked off. Maybe he did want to do a little bit of hoaxing and trolling, but ran away. But yeah, it's a weird thing to go to a business park and say that you've got evidence. you know, you'd have to be a real sort of sick troll to want to do that. Like, and also you could be convicted of perjury and like all, you know, perverting the course of justice.
There was also another thing, which was in a forum somewhere, someone by the name of Andy Rue was speaking with someone and saying that they had no money to do something, and apparently someone offered them money and they said that, oh, I haven't got a bank account. This is years later, by the way. Haven't got a bank account because I ran away from home at 14 years old, right? And the reason why this was significant is because, unbeknown to the general public, Andy Rue was a pet name, a nickname that Andrew Gosden's parents actually gave to him. Again, this was another lead that wasn't really followed up on by police, and with IP addresses not being able to be traced and whatnot, it was another sort of case that went quiet.
Yeah, they did travel to the area in which they thought the IP address belonged to. The family did, especially his father, Kevin. But yeah, they leafleted the area. But again, nothing came of it, so it's another dead end. So there are lots of theories about what actually happened to Andrew, and there are various different ones flying around online. Much like the Jay Slater case, there is also a lot of conspiracies around this. So why don't you, Joey, tell me what you think happened to Andrew?
I, again, want to make sure it's put on record. With these things, they're disappearances, they're unsolved, they're mysteries. So all you can do is put 2 and 2 together and inevitably probably get 5, right? But for what it's worth, here are my 5 pence on the case. Here's what I think probably happened. I don't think that Andrew Gosden ran away. I think that all indications point to this not being a runaway from home. I think that the fact that he took his house keys with him, I think that the fact that he didn't take his PSP charger, I think that the fact that there was £100 in cash that he left when he only withdrew 200 from the account, do you know what I mean? So 100 is a significant amount extra, especially to a 14-year-old. I don't think that he was planning on running away from home. I also don't think, like a lot of people, that he was groomed over the internet. And the reason I don't think this is because if you look at it, right, Andrew Gosden didn't even have a mobile phone. He had a mobile phone before, and when it broke, his parents asked him if he wanted it replaced, and he said he'd rather have an Xbox instead. Right? Now, he also didn't have an email address, and the email address he had assigned to him at school was checked, and there was nothing on there. The Xbox he has didn't have Xbox Live or anything like that. So
yeah,
it was pretty, and the PSP also didn't have an account where he could access the internet. He didn't have a laptop, anything like that. The family home shared a computer that was searched by police and interrogated and whatnot. There was literally no evidence that he had been in contact with anyone online, right? So I don't think that Andrew Gosden was groomed online. That does not mean that I don't think that Andrew Gosden was groomed, because my theory on it would be that Andrew did come into contact with an adult who groomed him. I believe that adult was someone who either knew the family, knew where Andrew was from, and someone that had spent time around. It's worth noting that he didn't buy a return ticket, and that suggests that with the fact he left with his house key, maybe he felt that he would be going home. Maybe someone had offered him a lift. Maybe someone had said that they would drop him home. Maybe that was someone he knew. Maybe, you know, when you look at the fact he went missing on a Friday, that's the end for most of the working week. Maybe it was someone that worked in London. And the fact that there was no online trace, right, what you've got to remember is nowadays you hardly see telephone boxes around. In 2007, every high street had a couple of phone boxes on them, right? So you could have had someone's phone number and you could have spoke to someone over the phone. Or it could be a secretive relationship with someone that was known to the family, right? And when I say relationship, I mean a friendship, anything, right? But I believe that there would have been an adult involved that potentially groomed Andrew and either lured him to London, or Andrew picked to go to London because it was a place of interest to himself. Now, if I had to be really specific and say, who was this, how did this happen? I would look heavily through a magnifying glass at the Young and Gifted scheme, because that's the only place that he came out of contact with his parents for a considerable amount of time. They said they noticed a difference in his character, in his behaviour when he came back. Was there an adult there that potentially he could have come into contact with, he could have been groomed by there, and did something go on there? That's what I would like to know.
Yeah.
And obviously I don't think there was ever a sort of investigation to everyone that had ever worked there, but all I'm saying is, if this completely hypothetical, almost conspiracy theory that I'm throwing out there is true, or has legs at least, believe me, predators, people that groom children, they work their way into all positions of life. Ian Huntley was literally a janitor at a school with a history of violence towards women and sexual offences. Yeah, I know policemen that have gone on to be basically proven to be nonces. Community support officers, school teachers. Yeah. Literally like loads of community centre workers, loads of different people that have had access to working with children. So to say it's beyond the realms of possibility that no one at that Young and Gifted scheme could have groomed Andrew Gosden is stupid, in my opinion. It could well have happened.
I'm going to counter this theory, because I don't necessarily subscribe to the theory of the grooming element of it, and I'll explain why. The Young Gifted program was a whole year prior. Mm-hmm. He didn't have a phone. He didn't have email. The person would have had to meet up with him several times to convince someone to do something like this. So I don't know how he meets that person unless they're in the general area, and then how well would they know London? I think there's some difficulties in just piecing that together. And then I'm thinking, is it someone from school? Probably not. Then I'm thinking, is it someone, like you said, around his family in London that had coerced him to come down to London? That is entirely conceivable. So I think that's an option which could be part of the grooming story. But I subscribe more to the theory that it was more of a chance encounter that happened in London, and something happened when he was down there, as opposed to necessarily being groomed. And the reason why is, I think there's more credibility, bearing in mind that there were 2 gigs that day that he could have gone to where he'd been seeing some of his favourite bands. He was potentially meeting up with a friend of some description. Friends, it could be anyone, right? Couldn't it? Could be someone that was grooming him, to be fair. But he was meeting up with someone, he was going to this gig, a band that he really wanted to see, and something happened on the way to that event. Maybe he was mugged, maybe something more sinister happened, maybe it was just a chance encounter. I feel that that's a more likely scenario than the grooming story, purely because of the lack of evidence around it. But again, if you're grooming a young lad, you're probably going to do it in a way where you're not going to be traced.
I do get where you're coming from, but I would also argue the point that predators are meticulous.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, not every predator is the type that Chris Hansen catches. Yeah? Most predators are meticulous in their planning of these situations and whatnot. So let's say, for example, it was someone from the Young and Gifted scheme. Let's say, for example, it was a school teacher. It was something like that. Who knows? It could be a school teacher that, worked at that school and then took a job in London. And as I say, payphones could have been used the day that he walked home, the day before. Now, obviously, that's a reasonable amount of time that he could have spoke to someone over a payphone and organised something. And again, unbeknown to Andrew, it could have been, come down and see me in London for the day. I'll take you here. We'll do this. We'll go to this gig, whatever. And that could have been a way to do it. I think that we already spoke about the fact that he wasn't said to be street smart, and I think his family also acknowledged that he wasn't said to be street smart and whatnot, and therefore I do think that the grooming theory is the most likely.
I also think the other element of this was that the parents were not technologically savvy, and while they said that he did have limited access to the internet, I'm going to tell you now, you could have got internet on that Xbox, and you could have done it in a very sort of quiet way. There were schemes during that time where you could get free, week access to Xbox.
But did the police not seize and search and analyze all of these.
But again, like, how much can you go onto an Xbox and find whether they're accessing the internet? Like, I think with the laptop, Charlotte's laptop, by the way, which was the family's laptop, they went through and obviously there's nothing there. So that's totally fine. The school computer and email accounts, they searched. The one thing, and I'll tell you this from experience, I met people on Xbox that I had never known, I knew nothing about, and they became friends of mine. So I do think that's a potential possibility. He was sat in the basement. He could have easily hopped on, got a headset and talked to someone.
And what sort of time was this you met these people on an Xbox? Was it around?
Yeah, it was around
sort of
2007. Yeah,
time,
it was.
it?
Yeah, I was playing Xbox at that time, to be fair. Yeah. I did live in London.
Yeah.
I think there are, what I find so fascinating about this is there are so many different routes. Like for me, right, there's the grooming route, there's an opportunistic encounter which someone grabbed him at the time. There's that he did just voluntarily disappear. He just, wanted to, escape and get out of his life and wanted to move away from home and do that, right?
You would have come back by now.
You would have come back.
You'd have come back by now. Mate,
So,
I'm 30.
okay.
I'm 31 this year.
No, listen.
He went missing when he was 14.
So what about the theory in which he wasn't completely happy with his own identity? His father came out and did do an appeal to the gay community. There's also rumours in which he was potentially trans as well. And what happens if he was so worried about what his parents would think, bearing in mind, we mentioned this at the start, that they were loving, caring parents, absolutely, but they were religious and that they had certain beliefs, and his beliefs might not have subscribed to that. There are some causational elements that you could say would be part of it. So
Yes, in the initial disappearance. But since 2007, the world has changed a lot, especially when you come on to the gay community, transgender community, things like that. Especially then when, he would have had access to following the news and seeing the appeals and seeing the parents saying, like, just come home, like, we're happy with whatever and things like that. And rightly so, times have moved forward. Like, I don't think that still to this day you're living in secrecy over it.
The one thing that I've never understood is that he goes to London, one of the most heavily covered CCTV places in the entire world, and we've never got more footage than the footage from the train station.
Literally just walking out of King's Cross.
He's just completely disappeared. And bear in mind that, like, all of this leaflets, he was on milk cartons. This was one of the most high-profile missing people cases. And the fact that we've never been able to find anything about him since, it does predicate that something more sinister might have happened to Andrew.
So let me ask you a question. Give me a percentage. What percentage do you think that Andrew Gosden is alive?
I would say less than 10%, personally. You?
Less than 10?
Yeah.
Less than 10?
I think there's a 10% chance he's alive.
You're off your nut.
Do you think it's way less than that?
You are off your nut.
Do you think?
Mate, it's about a 0.01% chance.
Really?
Yeah.
The only reason why I'm saying 10 is because I think it's really, like, if it happened in London and there was a murder in London, I think it would be so difficult to hide that. I feel there would be evidence left, right and centre.
Not really.
Do you think?
Tie weights to someone's legs, drop them off the side of the Thames or something like that.
I think with all of the CCTV around the Thames,
lure someone back to a crack den in London.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, all right, we think of London as being the city, but that's the thing about London. You're never 5 minutes away from what the Americans would call a slum, and you're never 5 minutes away from £1 million house.
Crazy case, hey mate.
Yeah.
It's something that you've all been asking for. Patak Gaming, by the way, is a guy that's been commenting on it. I'll put his little comments on there. He's done 5 comments asking for this case.
Okay.
So he had to do it.
Well, we got there in the end. People, let us know your thoughts. What happened to Andrew Gosden? Is he still out there? What are your theories on this case? And let us know what you want us to talk about next time. We will see you all in the next one.